My name is Evelyn Joyce Harper, and I gave my son the house. Then a week later, his wife served me an eviction notice. You might actually regret skipping this part. So before you sit down and listen, please take a moment to like the video and subscribe to Grace's Truth channel. Now let's listen to this story with Grace's Truth. I remember the morning I found it. The air was still heavy with dew. Birds chirped the way they always do when the world hasn't quite started spinning yet. I shuffled to the porch in my robe, coffee in hand, expecting bills or a newsletter from the church. Instead, there it was. A crisp, cream-colored envelope. Addressed not to me, but to occupant. My heart stuttered. I've been through enough in my life to recognize when something isn't right, even when it wears its politeness like perfume. I opened it slowly. Inside a 3-page legal document. Cold. Clinical, notice to vacate. 7 days. Filed by Lauren Harper. That's my daughter-in-law. My knees gave a little. I sat down hard on the porch swing. The mug of coffee still steaming slid off my knee and hit the concrete with a dull crack. My own daughter-in-law had filed a formal eviction notice against me. The house I had lived in for over 30 years. The house where I raised Thomas, my only son. The house where his father, my late husband, had built our first pantry shelf by hand. The same shelf Lauren now used to hold imported teas and skincare creams. I read the notice again. Then a third time. My hands trembled, but not from shock. From something deeper. You see, just 7 days earlier I had signed over the title. Voluntarily. Trusting. Thomas said it would simplify things. That he and Lauren wanted to refinance the mortgage under better terms, maybe expand the house. Build equity. Start a life. They said I could stay as long as I wanted. We'll take care of you, Mom. That's what he said. I believed him. Of course I did. He was my son. But now the paper in my hand told a different story. A story where I was no longer Evelyn Harper homeowner. I was just occupant. I didn't cry. Not yet. Instead, I went back inside, made another cup of coffee, and sat at the table like I had done every morning for decades. The silence in the house was different. It didn't wrap around me like a familiar robe. It pressed in tight, like a coat that no longer fit. Thomas and Lauren were out. A note on the fridge said they were taking Liam, my grandson, to the park. I stared at that note for a long time. It was written on the back of one of my recipe cards. The handwriting was bubbly artificial. Lauren's. I walked through the house room by room. The living room still smelled like lemon oil from my weekly polish. The rug was the same one Thomas had spilled juice on at age 7. The kitchen table still bore the nick where I once dropped a carving knife. But something had changed. The house was no longer mine. Not on paper, and soon not even in presence. I looked at the certificate on the wall from my years as a church treasurer. 40 years, never a single dollar missing, never a single entry misfiled. I had managed budgets larger than most families ever dream of. And yet here I was being pushed out of my own home like a forgetful old woman who had overstayed her welcome. I sat back down, the eviction notice spread out before me, and I read every line again. They were trying to make it look clean, legal, sanitized. But underneath it all, the message was clear. Get out! You're in the way. I didn't pack a bag that day. I didn't confront them when they returned from the park. I said nothing. I smiled, reheated some stew, and listened to Lauren complain about the swings being filthy. But inside, I had already started something else. I wasn't going to stay where I wasn't wanted, but I wasn't going to go quietly either. When Thomas got home that evening, I waited at the kitchen counter, the eviction notice tucked neatly into a folder beside me. I'd set out 2 cups of tea just like I used to when he was in high school, and came home tense from football practice. I hoped the routine might disarm him, bring back the boy who once told me I was his favorite person in the world. Instead, he came in with a distracted smile and an armload of grocery bags. Lauren followed already on her phone, ignoring me as she dropped her designer tote on the table. Thomas kissed the top of my head absently, like you might pat a dog that always sits in the same spot. Hey, Mom, dinner in a bit. I didn't answer. I just slid the folder toward him. He opened it, scanned the top page, and blinked. His shoulders stiffened. He looked at Lauren, who was suddenly much more interested in scrolling than before. Yeah, so, this. It's not what it looks like, he said, stammering slightly. It's kind of a legal formality. A legal formality, I repeated slowly. Yeah, I mean, just something the lawyer advised. Something to protect the refinancing deal. It's temporary. Purely procedural. I looked him dead in the eyes. He couldn't hold my gaze. Lauren chimed in without looking up. It's not personal, Evelyn. It's just easier this way. We can't have complications on the title if we're applying for the grant next quarter. Complications? That's what I was now. A complication. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I just leaned back in my chair and let them talk. Let them twist themselves into knots, explaining how removing me from the property I bought and lived in for over 3 decades was for my benefit. Thomas reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I would never ever kick you out, he said. The betrayal was that he sounded like he believed it. But that notice wasn't fiction. It had my address, my name, a vacate date, and it came from his wife. I sipped my tea. Then I asked, "So when do the movers come?" He froze. Lauren finally set her phone down. "There's no rush," she said too quickly. "Obviously, we're not going to force anything, but sooner would be smoother." She smiled. Tight. Practiced. And that was when I knew this wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't some red tape error or overzealous legal assistant. This was planned. This was coordinated. And Thomas was either too weak to stop it or too willing to let it happen. I stood up and walked to the sink, washed my cup, dried it, and placed it back in the cabinet. Thomas called after me. "Mom, seriously, it's just paperwork. You're not going anywhere." But I already knew the truth. I was already gone. That night, I sat in bed and thought about the moment I signed over the deed. It was a Saturday, warm. I made grilled cheese for Liam, and Thomas brought a folder with bright yellow sticky notes and said it would save them thousands in interest. He said I'd always be part of the house, that this was just setting things up for the future. And like a fool, I believed him. 'Cause mothers always do. Because we want to. Because we don't expect the same hands we held as toddlers to turn around and lock the door behind us. The house was in their name now, and apparently my welcome had an expiration date. But they'd underestimated something crucial. I hadn't made it through 7 decades of life without learning how to protect myself. They thought I gave them the house, but what I'd really done was create a trail. And they were about to find out what I kept quietly, carefully, legally in reserve. I didn't sleep much that night. But I started planning, because sometimes the best revenge is reminding people what just paperwork can really mean. Lauren's smiles had always come with an aftertaste. When I first met her, she was all charm, gushing about my chicken pot pie, complimenting my wallpaper, which she later called antique horror on Facebook, and telling Thomas I was the strongest woman she'd ever met. I believed her. At least I tried to. But over the years, that sugary shell started to crack. The smiles stayed, but they became tighter, more choreographed, like she was constantly posing for an invisible camera. And ever since the deed was signed over, those smiles had started to feel weaponized. The next Sunday, we had brunch like we always did, except this time I wasn't seated at the table when I arrived. There was a new chair in the kitchen, sleek white, totally unlike the rustic wooden set I'd collected over 30 years. Mine were gone, replaced. Lauren greeted me with the same familiar smile. "Evelyn, you made it." She always said my name like it was a brand she didn't quite trust. I sat down at the table, noticing how the place setting in front of me didn't match the rest. No charger plate, no folded napkin, just a bare fork and a chipped mug. Intentional, but I smiled back. "Oh, I wouldn't miss it," I said. Liam ran over and hugged my leg. His voice, his energy that was real. The one thread still tying me to the life I thought I had. Lauren served quiche, vegan. She knew I couldn't eat soy. Thomas brought out a tray of fresh fruit, then sat beside her. There was no "Mom, sit here," or "You okay?" Just a performance underway, and I was the reluctant guest star. The conversation revolved around the house. New countertops. A potential deck expansion. Paint swatches for the nursery, even though they hadn't announced a second child yet. Everything about their home, their vision. As if I wasn't still sleeping in the back bedroom. As if I hadn't paid the first 20 years of the mortgage while raising a child and burying a husband. Then Lauren did something I'll never forget. She stood to clear the dishes and looked directly at me. With that same sweet smile, she said, "You've built such a wonderful foundation here. We're so excited to make it truly ours." Truly ours? Thomas didn't flinch. My fork slipped just slightly against the plate-scraping porcelain. Liam reached for more fruit and chirped, "When is Grandma moving to her new house?" Lauren's eyes widened slightly. Thomas coughed. I looked at Liam and smiled. "Soon, sweetheart, but not before I make you a new blanket." Lauren was already walking back to the kitchen, but I saw the tension in her shoulders. That I was still calm unnerved her. She expected panic, outrage, drama. She didn't understand me at all. That afternoon, I returned to my room. My room in a house I technically no longer owned, and took inventory. Not of possessions, of leverage, photos, letters, receipts. I had everything. I'd kept every statement, every tax bill. I had original documentation of the deed transfer, including the clause I'd insisted on last minute, when the notary was running late and Lauren had gone upstairs. Lifetime residency rights? Lauren had been too busy coordinating paint palettes to notice. Thomas had just nodded and said, "Of course, Mom. I wasn't going anywhere unless I chose to." And that clause, it was legally binding. That night, I made a copy of the paperwork and placed it in a fireproof folder. I also wrote a letter, not for Thomas, not even for Lauren, for myself, a reminder that I had not given everything away, that I still had a voice, that their housewarming party might be the coldest season of their marriage because winter was coming and I had the law on my side. The day I signed everything over plays in my mind like a scene I wish I could re-edit. It was a Saturday in early spring, the kind of day that makes you believe good things are coming. Blue skies, soft breeze, the smell of lilacs just beginning to bloom. Lauren had made muffins. Thomas brewed coffee. Liam sat on the floor with crayons drawing what he called our happy house. And they had a folder. Thomas talked fast about refinancing, lowering interest rates, removing liabilities from the paperwork. He used big words he knew I'd understand. I was an accountant for 4 decades. I'd reviewed more contracts than I could count. But this wasn't business. This was trust. This was my son. He laid out the papers, highlighting spots where I needed to sign. He smiled reassuringly. "This doesn't change anything, Mom. It's still your home. We just need the deed to secure the equity. We'll handle the taxes. You shouldn't be worrying about all that now." Lauren handed me a pen. It was fancy gold-tipped. I remember that because the ink leaked a little and I had to blot the page. I remember laughing. I remember saying, "Well, I suppose I'm the landlord now, huh?" And Lauren smiled too widely and said, "More like the matriarch." That word stuck in my throat even then. It felt ceremonial, like they were placing me on a shelf safe and no longer needed. I read the top 2 pages. Everything looked in order. My name was still listed. I was listed as a grantor, not a tenant. Thomas signed beside me. Then Lauren. Then the notary, who had barely looked up from her clipboard. But then, as they turned to print the final copy, the notary's phone rang. She excused herself to take the call on the porch. Lauren stepped away to check the oven. And in that tiny pocket of time, I flipped back through the document. I saw a blank line. Additional provisions. I picked up the pen and added one sentence. Grantor retains full lifetime residency rights and cannot be removed without signed consent. I initialed it. When the notary returned, she barely glanced at the clause. She stamped it, filed it. Done. Lauren didn't check. Neither did Thomas. Maybe they were too eager. Maybe they thought I was too old to be clever. But I had worked with lawyers. I had rewritten contracts. I knew how paper protects people and how it betrays them too. And I knew in my gut that I might need protection. Not because I didn't trust Thomas, but because I didn't trust how much he trusted her. Now sitting in a home that no longer bore my name, I clung to that clause like a rope in the dark. They didn't know I had it. They thought they'd won, and I knew better than to correct them yet. The next morning, Lauren left a brochure on my bed. "Assisted living. Just options," she said breezily. "We want you to thrive, Evelyn." I thanked her. I smiled, and I made 3 certified copies of the deed. One for my lawyer, one for the bank, and one for when the real performance began. Because it was clear now, They didn't just want the house. They wanted my absence. But what they didn't realize was that I had just legally tied myself to every inch of these walls. I was the ghost they couldn't exorcise, and I was about to haunt them politely, powerfully, and with all the quiet strength they had underestimated. The first time I noticed the bedroom door was locked, it was a Thursday. The house was quiet. Thomas had taken Liam to soccer practice, and Lauren was working from home, which usually meant long video calls with her feet on the coffee table. I had finished folding laundry and was bringing their clean sheets back to the master bedroom like I always did. I turned the knob. It didn't move. I tried again gently. Nothing. I stood there for a moment staring at the door like it had grown teeth. I hadn't been locked out of any room in my own home since Liam was a toddler and locked himself in the bathroom with a fistful of pudding. This was different. The doorknob had been changed. It was a sleek black model with a keyhole that hadn't been there before. I knocked, unsure why. Lauren answered from upstairs. "Oh, sorry. I had it changed for security. You know, with Liam getting into everything." She didn't come down. Didn't explain further. I stood there holding their sheets, suddenly feeling like a maid who had overstepped. I didn't push. I folded the sheets and left them outside the door. But it wasn't just the bedroom. Over the next week, other small changes appeared. The laundry room door had a new deadbolt. The attic, once used for storing family photo boxes and my Christmas decorations, had a lock with a code panel. The code I was never given. Then came the pantry. I reached for my apron one morning and found the cabinet empty. Inside was a sleek set of matching containers, all labeled in Lauren's handwriting. I opened another drawer where my church cookbooks used to sit. Gone. In their place, juice cleanses, detox diets, almond flour recipes. The kitchen had been rearranged. Not remodeled, reassigned. Even the smell had changed. No more cinnamon, no more simmering soup bones. Just lavender spray and the faint chemical sweetness of store-bought air fresheners. It wasn't just the space. It was me being slowly erased. The final nudge came when I saw the family calendar on the fridge. March 16th. Mom's room. Guest room, deep clean. March 17th. Elder law consult. March 20th. Call facility about availability. Facility. They weren't just hoping I'd leave. They were planning it. I took a picture of the calendar with my phone. I printed it, added it to my folder, just in case they tried to say it was never written. That night at dinner, Thomas mentioned they might reclaim the back bedroom for Lauren's new office. "I mean, you're barely home during the day," he said, "and we'd love to give you more independence. Maybe closer to the senior center." I nodded, chewing slowly, breathing through my nose. Lauren added, "We could even help cover moving expenses, make it comfortable." They were offering me a buyout from the life I built. I looked at Liam, who sat between them, blissfully unaware. He wore a paper crown he'd made in school. "Grandma," he said, "can I sleep in your room tonight?" Lauren stiffened. I smiled. "Of course you can," he cheered. She stayed silent. That night, after Liam fell asleep curled against my side, I whispered to the dark ceiling, "They want to evict me." And the darkness answered, "Then let them try." It started with the gas bill. It was the first week of April, and I noticed I hadn't seen a utility envelope in over a month. Normally, I was the one who kept track, decades of habit from running both my household and the church's books. But this time, there was nothing. I opened the kitchen drawer where I stored mail. Empty. Then I checked the trash. Buried under an avocado peel and a crumpled catalog, I found the envelope already opened. Billing name, Lauren Harper. Service address, my address. I felt the shift in my bones. Quiet, like the first floorboard creak before the house settles wrong. I checked the electricity next. Same thing. Then the water bill, all now in Lauren's name. It didn't stop there. My pharmacy app notified me that my insurance had been updated. I hadn't changed it. I called to ask. The representative informed me kindly that someone named Lauren Harper had requested to be listed as my primary caregiver for billing purposes. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I simply asked for a copy of the request. Then I called my lawyer. His name is Warren. He's been a family friend since my husband's funeral. I told him everything. He listened. When I explained the situation with the deed clause, he whistled low. "You have more leverage than most women in your shoes," he said. "And you've been smart." but now we need to be strategic. We met the next morning at his office. I handed him the folder, the deed, the photos of the calendar, the pharmacy forms, the updated utility bills all bearing Lauren's name. Warren skimmed the documents, then nodded. "This isn't just a family dispute," he said. "This is constructed removal. They're manufacturing your absence." I sat very still, meaning, they're slowly erasing your legal and domestic presence in the home. Once utilities, mail, and finances are in their name, it becomes easier for them to claim you're no longer a resident, especially if they convince any third party you've already left. I stared at him. "But I haven't." He tapped the deed. "That clause, it's your armor, and now we reinforce it." We filed a formal notice of residency intent. It sounded cold, almost sterile, but its purpose was warm. To assert that I still lived there, still had rights, and was not leaving voluntarily. We also requested a formal injunction against constructive eviction, a legal mechanism used when someone tries to push a tenant out without going through proper eviction channels. "They won't see this coming," Warren said. "They think I'm weak," I replied. He smiled. "Then let's be polite and precise." I returned home with a new fire in my chest. Lauren was out. Thomas was upstairs. I placed my copy of the injunction right on the entry table next to the essential oil diffuser she loved so much. She would find it first thing when she came in. I also placed sticky notes on all the doors that had been relocked, each labeled with "Property access protected under Clause 7C. Do not tamper." I didn't need to scream. I just needed to show I wasn't blind. That evening, I made my famous beef stew. I hadn't cooked in weeks, not since the passive takeover began. Thomas came down, sniffed the air, and smiled. "Smells like childhood." I ladled him a bowl. Lauren arrived just as he was finishing. Her face went pale when she saw the envelope on the table. She picked it up, read the first few lines, and froze. Then she turned to me. "What is this?" "Just paperwork," I said. "Nothing personal." She dropped it like it burned her. Thomas looked between us. "What's going on?" I stood, wiped my hands on the dish towel, and said, "We're finally having an honest conversation, whether you're ready or not." And then I smiled, sweet and sharp, just like hers used to be. The first picture that vanished was my wedding portrait. It hung in the hallway for decades, right above the thermostat. Everyone passed it. No one touched it. Until one morning it was gone. In its place, a brushed metal frame with an abstract print, cold, meaningless. I searched the house. Not in the basement. Not in the guest closet. Not in any of the storage bins I labeled myself. When I asked Lauren, she shrugged. "It didn't match the new aesthetic. I thought you'd packed it." I hadn't, and that was just the beginning. Family photos disappeared one by one, replaced by minimalist art and moody quotes about moving forward and creating space. Even the wall clock my husband and I bought on our honeymoon was gone. In its place, a digital model that played ambient spa sounds every hour on the hour. They weren't just replacing things. They were deleting me. I opened the guest closet one day, hoping to find my favorite throw blanket embroidered with Thomas's baby clothes, and found it stuffed beneath an air purifier and an unused yoga mat. The smell of lavender and sandalwood had become overwhelming. This wasn't my home anymore, but I was still in it. The kitchen had been rearranged. My spice rack was gone. The labels I'd carefully written, cumin, paprika, thyme, all replaced with sleek containers labeled Season 1, Season 2, as if flavor were a numbered broadcast. Even the mugs changed. My favorite one, chipped with a painted bluebird, was gone. In its place, matching matte black sets lined up like soldiers in a design showroom. It was Lauren's house now, and she was doing everything she could to make it reflect that visually, spiritually, symbolically. Thomas noticed, but he didn't speak up. He'd become quiet, passive, distant, as though he were watching the house change around him in slow motion, too paralyzed to stop it. He never asked about the missing photos. Never noticed the antique quilt that once hung behind the couch, now folded in a plastic tub in the garage labeled "To Donate." I started making nightly walks around the house. Not to patrol, not to protest. To remember. I'd trace my fingers along the baseboards I scrubbed every spring, the window panes I sealed with plastic every winter. I'd whisper my husband's name under my breath, letting the walls absorb what little of us remained. And one night I found something in the attic. A box labeled old kitchenware. Inside were the things they thought I wouldn't miss. My bluebird mug, the spice rack, the frayed dish towel I used to tie around my waist when Liam helped me bake. They hadn't thrown them out. They'd just buried them. I took the mug back down. The next morning, I used it in full view, drinking my coffee slowly at the kitchen table while Lauren packed Liam's lunch. She didn't say anything, but her eyes flicked to the mug like it was a curse. I smiled over the rim. That afternoon, I pulled out a few of the photos from the attic box and rehung them in my room. Quietly, deliberately. I wasn't reclaiming the house. I was creating a sanctuary, one that would outlast the performance happening in the living room. Because Lauren was building a kingdom of illusion, and I had the only copy of the truth. It was Liam who cracked the illusion without meaning to. It was a Tuesday evening, one of those rare quiet ones when Lauren had book club and Thomas was working late. I offered to watch Liam and she accepted with a clipped thanks, like she was doing me a favor. He was in his pajamas, sleepy-eyed, clutching his favorite stuffed bear. We curled up on the couch, my old couch now draped in one of Lauren's minimalist throws, and I read him the same bedtime story I used to read to Thomas. Goodnight, Moon. Halfway through, he looked up at me. Grandma, he said, when are you moving out? I paused, blinked. Why do you ask that, sweetheart? Mommy said you have a new house now. She said I can have your room when you're gone. He said it like he was asking about the weather, like it was already decided. I swallowed. Do you want me to leave? His brow furrowed. No. Then who's gonna make me cinnamon toast when I have bad dreams? I smiled, but inside something cracked. Lauren hadn't just been maneuvering behind my back. She was planting ideas in Liam's head, priming him to forget me, to erase me before I even left. It was working. And yet, not entirely. Liam still clung to our rituals. He still asked for my old lullabies, still traced my laugh lines with his tiny fingers. But he was young. Memory fades fast when it's never reinforced. I tucked him in, kissed his forehead, and sat on the edge of the bed longer than usual. The next morning, I opened a locked bin in the garage and retrieved my old camcorder. It still worked. I spent the day recording little things. Me reading Liam's stories, baking his favorite cookies, walking through the garden, pointing out plants we'd watered together. I spoke softly to the camera like I was telling him secrets. Someday you might forget these mornings, but they were real, and they were full of love. I made 3 copies of the footage. One I hid in my room, one I mailed to Warren, and one I slipped into a padded envelope marked, "For Liam to open when you're older." I left it in my bank deposit box, because Lauren might repaint walls and erase names, but I would not vanish quietly. Not from Liam's heart, not from history. Later that week, Lauren hosted a baby shower for her friend. The house was filled with laughter, pastel balloons, tiny cupcakes. I wasn't invited. I stayed in my room reading. But I heard them talking about nesting, cleansing energy, eliminating clutter. At one point, someone said, "Isn't it awkward having your MIL still live here?" Lauren's response was muffled, but I caught enough. She's leaving soon. We're just giving her time to adjust. I wrote those words down. Verbatim. They weren't just waiting for me to go. They were counting on it. I looked around my room, the last place still untouched. My books, my blankets, my past, and I realized I wasn't mourning the loss of my home. I was preparing to defend it, because I didn't just live here. I had built this, and they were about to learn that you can't evict history, especially when it's armed with truth. The baby shower wasn't mine. It never was. They'd planned it in secret, at least that's what they assumed. But nothing in that house escaped my notice anymore. I knew about the catering weeks in advance, knew about the custom floral arch, and the Instagram photographer Lauren hired to capture the moment naturally. I even saw the guest list accidentally left open on the kitchen iPad. 35 names. Mine wasn't one of them. The house buzzed with energy that morning. Lauren flitted from room to room like a bride on her wedding day. Thomas lingered by the coffee machine, looking like a man who'd misplaced his backbone. I stood in the kitchen watching them set the table. Pastel plates, monogrammed napkins, champagne flutes with pink sugar rims. I waited for someone to say, "Evelyn, will you be joining us?" No one did. So I went back to my room and dressed carefully. Not for revenge, for remembrance. I wore the necklace Thomas gave me when he was 12, a cheap silver locket from a school fundraiser, but it meant the world to him. I wore the cardigan my husband bought on our last trip before he passed. And I pinned a brooch my mother left me shaped like a sparrow. Then I walked outside and left. I didn't slam the door, didn't announce my departure. I just vanished. I walked to the park, sat beneath the oldest oak, and breathed. 2 hours later, I checked my phone. Photos, videos, smiling guests, pink balloons, a gender reveal smoke pop that turned blue. Liam was there, standing beside Lauren. I scrolled heart-steady, fingers slow. Then I saw it. One photo accidentally posted, quickly deleted. A shot of the living room before guests arrived. Zoomed out. Empty. And there on the mantel where my wedding photo once hung, a large white canvas sign. New beginnings only. It was centered, bold, arrogant. I saved the image. Because symbols matter. Words matter. And when someone replaces your memory with a quote, they're telling the world your chapter is over. But my chapter was just starting. That evening, I came back to a quiet house. Lauren was upstairs. Thomas wasn't home. Liam peeked out of his room and asked, "Why didn't you come?" I knelt beside him. "They didn't invite me?" I said gently. "Why not?" I touched his cheek. Some people forget how much others love them until it's too late. He hugged me tight. And in that hug, I made a decision. I would leave, but on my terms, and not without leaving something behind, something louder than silence. I didn't pack in a fury. I didn't slam doors or toss drawers open. I moved like a woman arranging the pieces of a puzzle she's already solved. 3 days after the baby shower, I woke up early before the house stirred, and I began, not with clothes, with paper. The deed copy, the injunction, the photos, the pharmacy form Lauren filed without consent. All of it went into a neat leather folio. Then I wrote a letter. 4 pages handwritten. Not angry, just final. It began with, "Dear Thomas, I never thought I'd have to protect myself from you." I folded the letter, placed it on top of the folder, and left both on the kitchen table beneath the potted orchid Lauren insisted on watering with spring water. Next came the packing. Just one suitcase. The blue one with a stubborn zipper and a faded tag that still had my maiden name scrawled on it, E. Wilkins. I packed only what mattered. My late husband's watch. My church hymnal, 2 cardigans, and the camcorder with the memory card still inside. I looked around the room one last time. My room. The photos still hung where I placed them. The bluebird mug was clean, sitting on the windowsill with fresh tea stains. Liam's latest crayon drawing a rocket ship and Grandma's planet was tucked into the mirror frame. I took it. Before I left, I placed a key on Lauren's pillow. Not as surrender, as punctuation, because the next chapter had already been signed. The cab came at noon. I didn't ask Thomas to drive me. I didn't text goodbye. I just walked out the front door, pulled the suitcase behind me, and shut it gently. I didn't look back. When the cab pulled away, I saw the curtain twitch. That would be Lauren, watching. Good. Let her wonder. The cottage I moved into was small, yellow, and quiet. The kind of house with creaky floors and wide windows. I signed the lease in full cash up front. No co-signers. No shared title. Just my name. It smelled like cedar and freedom. Warren visited later that week with paperwork. He grinned when he handed me the envelope. Filed. Finalized. They can't touch you now. I thanked him. Then I wrote a second letter. Not to Thomas. To Liam. I tucked it away with the camcorder, sealed it, and wrote on the envelope, "For when you're ready to remember." I wasn't planning revenge anymore. I was preserving truth. Because one day he'll ask why I left. And he'll deserve the real answer, not the version they'll give him. The envelope must have cracked something open. 3 days after I left, Thomas called. Not texted, not emailed. He called. I let it ring once, twice, 3 times. Then I answered. Silence. Then, "Mom." His voice was smaller than I remembered. Maybe it was the guilt. Maybe it was just the absence of Lauren in the background. I read the letter he said. I didn't reply. I didn't know all of it. I didn't know about the pharmacy or the calendar. Or the locks. I let him sit in the silence. Then finally I said, "You didn't want to know." That cracked him. He began to cry, not dramatic sobs, but those quiet, shameful tears that come from recognizing you. Let the wrong person steer the ship for too long. I thought we were helping you. No, Thomas, you were replacing me. He asked if he could visit. I told him yes, but only him. Not Lauren. Not yet. He arrived the next day with a bouquet of grocery store flowers and the look of a man who had aged 5 years in 5 days. We sat on my new porch. He didn't touch the tea I poured. I kept thinking you'd blow up, he said. Yell, fight, call the police. But you just walked away. I don't believe in fire, I said. I believe in records. He smiled weakly. You always said paper speaks louder than anger. I did. Then softly Liam asked where you went. My hands stilled on the teacup. What did you tell him? That you were making a home just for him. I didn't cry, but I felt something swell in my throat. Then he asked the question I knew was coming. Can I fix it? I looked at him. My son, my beautiful broken son. You can tell the truth, I said. And you can stop letting someone else write your story. He nodded. We sat there as the sky darkened. And for the first time in months, I felt something settle inside me. Not peace, but direction, because I wasn't finished. I had one more move to make, and this time it would be public. Lauren's group chat was her temple. She lived in it, her sanctuary of curated emojis, humble brags, and backhanded comments dressed as self-care. I'd always found it silly the way she narrated her life for that little digital circle of friends, but I never paid it much attention. Until I saw the screenshots. Thomas showed them to me. He had gone through her tablet after our conversation. Not because he wanted to invade her privacy, because something in him had finally snapped. Maybe it was the letter. Maybe it was Liam asking if I died. Whatever it was, it broke through. He scrolled through hundreds of messages and found the thread. Group name, Blissful Wives Society. A week before the eviction notice she posted, we finally got the house. The old lady signed it like a lamb. Soon she'll be out, and we can actually start our lives. Another message. I've already cleared 2 rooms. Once she's out, I'm turning her memory cave into a meditation suite. And then, Thomas is too soft, but he'll thank me later. Dozens of them. Thomas took screenshots, then sent them to me. Then, to Warren. We had proof. Not just of manipulation, but intent. It was Lauren in her own words celebrating my erasure, bragging, mocking, admitting to replacing me like bad wallpaper. I stared at those messages for a long time. My hands didn't shake. My heart didn't race. I just felt clarity. This wasn't about misunderstanding, or miscommunication, or even entitlement. It was conquest. She had seen me as an obstacle, and she thought kindness was weakness. But now I had her words. And I knew exactly what to do with them. I called Warren that evening. We drafted a letter not to Lauren, but to her employer. She worked for a nonprofit managing donor relations. Reputation mattered. Empathy was their currency. I didn't send the screenshots. I sent a formal notice stating that a legal complaint was being considered regarding elder mistreatment supported by digital evidence of intent and coordination. It was clean, professional, chilling. And I sent it with one sentence. No further action will be taken if a public acknowledgement and apology is made within 5 days. We sent a copy to Lauren's inbox, BCC'd to her board of directors. And then, we waited. She didn't respond at first. But 2 days later, Thomas called. Mom, he said she's spiraling. She says you're ruining her life. I said I haven't even started. He didn't laugh. Neither did I. But by day 4 it came. A message on the neighborhood Facebook page. A long, rambling post. I'd like to publicly apologize to my mother-in-law, Evelyn Harper, for recent misunderstandings. I regret my choices and the harm I've caused. She has always been a part of our home, and she deserves respect and appreciation. I'm committed to making amends. No mention of eviction. No screenshots, of course. But to the world, it looked like contrition. To me, it looked like a crack in her armor. And that's all I needed. Because sometimes the loudest revenge is public silence in the face of someone else's performance. He came alone. Thomas showed up at the cottage on a Thursday afternoon with a cardboard box and an envelope. He knocked once and waited. I opened the door slowly. He looked tired, worn down by tension he'd been too passive to challenge for too long. In his hands, the box looked heavier than it should have. "I brought your things," he said. I stepped aside and let him in. We didn't speak at first. I offered him a glass of lemonade. He took it. Then gently he placed the box on my table. Inside, the photo albums Lauren had removed, the bluebird mug, my cookbooks, the knitted baby blanket I made for Liam, and something I didn't expect. The framed wedding portrait. He looked at me. She told me she donated it. I found it in the garage behind the storage racks. I nodded. "Thank you." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the envelope. "This is from me, not her." I opened it. It was a letter, handwritten. Apologizing, admitting, owning it. Every passive moment, every silent nod, every time he looked the other way while I was being erased under the guise of progress. "I can't undo it," he said, "but I want to be better. For Liam, for you." I folded the letter carefully. "You have to raise him to remember people who loved him," I said. "Not just the ones who stayed in the photo." Thomas nodded. "He asks about you all the time." "Then tell him I'm not gone. Just living differently." We stood in the quiet for a while. Then he asked the question that had been sitting on both our chests. "Will you ever come back?" I shook my head. "No, but I'll always be close." He understood. He hugged me longer than he had in years. And when he left, I kept the door open, letting the summer air drift through. That night, I unpacked the box slowly, restoring memories to their rightful places. One picture at a time, word spread quietly as it always does in neighborhoods like ours. Somehow, without anyone really saying it out loud, everyone knew something had happened in Thomas and Lauren's house. It wasn't the post. It wasn't even the letter Lauren had been forced to write. It was the way the air around their perfect lawn grew still, how neighbors who once waved with sugary enthusiasm now nodded with cautious sympathy when they saw her unloading groceries. The invitation lists got shorter. The smiles became thinner. Lauren withdrew first from the neighborhood committee, then from her job. She resigned, citing family restructuring. I read it in the newsletter. Thomas came by more often after that. Sometimes with Liam, sometimes alone. Never with Lauren. Each visit he brought something small. A photo Liam drew, a bag of flour so we could bake together, a thank you note written in crayon. And one day, quietly, as if passing a relic, he gave me the blueprints to the house. "I don't want her rewriting it all," he said. "This was your design. It deserves to be remembered." I took them gently. He was trying. Slowly, clumsily, but sincerely. One morning, Liam stayed with me while Thomas ran errands. We made banana bread, played cards, and watched old home videos on the camcorder. At one point, he turned to me and asked, "Why don't you live with us anymore?" I didn't lie. I said, "Sometimes grown-ups forget how to share." He nodded slowly, like he understood more than I gave him credit for. Then he whispered, "I like your house better." Later that day, I found him drawing a picture. A little yellow house, a lady with white hair, and a small boy holding her hand. He labeled it, "Grandma's Real Home." I didn't cry, but I felt something deeper than pride. I felt continuity. Legacy not in bricks, but in memory. The house I left behind was no longer mine, but the love I gave there, it had found new soil, and it was growing beautifully. I bought a new mailbox. Not because the old one was broken, just because it felt like time. This one was blue. Not navy, not powder. Just the right kind of quiet, bold blue, like the color of old denim or faded sky. I placed it at the end of the gravel driveway, watching as the installer mounted it into the earth. He asked if I wanted the numbers painted on. "No," I said. "Just the name. E. Harper." That was enough. Inside, the cottage smelled of cinnamon again. I had baked the banana bread Liam liked. There were 2 slices left on the plate, and I wrapped them carefully, knowing he'd visit tomorrow. I sat on the porch with a quilt over my legs and a glass of iced tea sweating on the table. The evening air buzzed with summer crickets. Somewhere down the road, a lawnmower started, then stopped, and I breathed. Not as someone hiding, as someone finished. I'd told my story in paper, in silence, in small steps that added up to something mighty. They'd tried to delete me, but I had rewritten myself into permanence. Thomas was rebuilding, slowly. He'd asked me to look over his new will. said he didn't want to make the same mistake twice. I agreed. Lauren never visited again. I didn't expect her to. Some women need to win loudly. Others know quiet victory is more enduring. She had wanted a house. I had a home. She had wanted status. I had love. She had wanted silence. I had a camera, a pen, a memory, and a grandson who knew where the cinnamon lived. That night, I took one of Liam's drawings from the fridge, carefully folded it, and placed it in a small cedar box with my wedding band and my husband's watch. The drawing read, "Grandma's real house. Forever." I smiled, then turned off the light, and rested. Stories like mine don't end with slamming doors or police reports. They end quietly where the ache used to be. A different kind of fullness grows. The kind you earn only after being gutted and stitched back together by your own hands. I gave my son the house, not to be erased, not to be relocated, but because I believed love could be enough. And when it wasn't, I had to choose, vanish or evolve. I chose to evolve. Lauren didn't expect paperwork. She didn't expect witnesses. She didn't expect me to play by rules. She thought only applied to Hurdy. But I knew better. I knew that survival sometimes comes not from fighting back loudly, but from planting flags no one sees until they're flying high and undeniable. This wasn't just revenge. This was clarity. Every room she tried to take from me, I replaced with one inside myself. And every piece of me she boxed away only sharpened the proof of who I really was. Now my grandson visits a house with real windows and real light. He eats cinnamon toast made by someone who still remembers why the cinnamon is always on the second shelf. He draws me in crayon not as a ghost, but as someone who stood her ground with kindness. I don't live in that old house anymore, but it still lives in me. So if you've ever felt invisible, erased, or quietly pushed aside, let this be your reminder. Sometimes walking away is the most powerful thing you'll ever do. And sometimes the softest voices carry the longest echoes. Thank you for listening.